communication problems? Ken has none. None. Someone say, yeah. Not listening. That's common.
Not communicating. You have the idea in your mind, but words don't.
You want, think. Kind of like what you want or think, or it's just hard to express your thoughts, feelings. Yeah. Yep. That's one for sure.
When Dad was with Carl said, why are there so many misunderstandings? Language problems.
Yep. Why so many so often?
Since the tongue really privately damage someone else's reputation so that we can feel better about ourselves.
Yeah, it's so much better to tear someone down.
Wanting to win the argument instead of understanding.
So much of this when it comes to politics.
I'll add a few words to yours, Edward, but yeah, at all costs.
Big one for me, not communicating concerns when they arise.
Yeah. Not keeping current. That's supposed to be a G. Close enough. Yeah, just not keeping current. Keeping short lists, short accounts. However you want to phrase that. All right, we are listing up some of our communication struggles. And I think, and in fact, I know that every one of these are going to be addressed, maybe not so much in this outline, but they will be addressed in the book as we work through it. We don't need to run through it, but I don't necessarily need to deliberately drag it in through a year-long study. But this is very important because some of us, there's some things we don't do, some things we're not able to do, but all of us communicate. So we want to make sure that we get a good grasp once again on rooting out the heart of our communication struggles. So I think there's a really good prayer that we could begin our studies with, and it's on the 3rd page, right at the beginning of chapter 1. Chapter 1, not that we need to pray it, but I'm going to read it because it's, I think, a good thing just to, again, keep in our minds. It's right at the beginning of chapter 1. Yeah, you got to go past the table of contents. Then you got the preface. There you go. God speaks right there. There you go. Okay, so here's what it says. That temper of mine, or let me say it this way. That temper of Tina, oh God, forgive her. Or realistically, yeah, I let it get the better of me yet again. When will I learn to wait until I've heard the whole story? That's Proverbs 18, 13, 17. Or James 1, swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. So when will I learn to wait until I've heard the whole story? Or to respond under pressure as Christ would? You know, because we've all had a bad day and we just come home and the least little thing, we just blow up. To meet evil with good, because they're sure not speaking the truth in love to me. or as some of us have experienced with many opposing political parties around us, you have to be very careful if you say anything at all, and are usually met with something, again, I think the word is visceral, but we can't return evil for evil. We return good for evil. I'm growing, Lord. But it's so true, right? But my growth is far too slow. So I'd like to blame that on you, I guess, but it's probably not going to go too far. So till, that has the idea of plowing. Till up my life. Break the clods of pride. Root out the weeds of selfishness. Plow under every vestige of stubbornness. Going back to, I have to be right at all costs. Cultivate me, and sow liberally more of the Spirit's fruit-bearing seed, love, joy, peace, gentleness, meekness, etc., self-control. Send showers. I don't know about storms, but send showers and shine brightly on my soul, that I will spring or sprout forth patience and kindness and love and self-control in abundance. That would be worth the $10. And my tongue will learn to help and heal and praise the name of the one through whom I pray. Amen. All right, so you can set that aside for a minute and take up your notes here. We are going to, I can do about 10 minutes per point. So this is just an outline of the book. So, in our quest for being more like God, careful consideration must be given to our words. Because you think God ever says, oops, I didn't mean to say that? Does God ever say, I regret saying that? So if we're going to be more like God, we're going to have to be a lot more cautious about our words. And again, as I think Andrew probably said, the problems isn't really with the vocabulary, it's with something else, and we'll get to that in a minute. So this study will remind us of several foundational truths about our words. So as I mentioned, the great battle in this war of words is not so much a vocabulary, but rather the battle is for our hearts. So grab your Bibles and let's look at Matthew 12, 33 through 37. I have 37 there, but we need to see the others too. And then if somebody else wants to look at the parallel passage in Luke 6, you could do that too. But Matthew 12. Matthew 12. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, first book of the New Testament. So then as we look, we see the big number 12, that's the chapter, and then in my Bibles, they are very small font numbers that go down to verse 33, which is the third paragraph up from the end of the chapter. Mine is titled, The Tree is Known by Its Fruits. So in verse 33, Jesus, of course, is speaking, and he says, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad, for the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers. Now we have to back up just a minute. What happened just previously to Jesus saying this? And maybe you can look at your chapter heading, because this is the pivot point of Jesus' ministry. In Matthew chapter 12, Jesus is going around throwing out all kinds of miracles, and he's healing everybody, and he's feeding the sick and raising the dead, and he heals this man with a withered hand. And then the religious leaders come up to him and they say, Jesus, you are doing this through the power of Satan. And that's when Jesus basically says, you know what? I'm done. You're done. No more Jews' kingdom. We're now going to start talking about this new economy, this new dispensation, this New Testament called the church. So that's the backdrop. That's the backdrop. They're accusing him of using Satan's power to do these miracles. So then he comes up to verse 33 and he says, make the tree good or make the tree bad. Verse 34, you brood of vipers. He's talking there again about the Pharisees, the religious community, the leaders, and he says, How can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And I think that's one of those biblical teachings that haunt us throughout the day, right? And it's not so much just during the course of the day, but usually when we start really getting frustrated and we drop the wrench or we drop the thing as we did today, a washer right in the middle of the driveway. I was helping someone. And you'd think that the washer would just fall, right? No, probably into the next door neighbor's grass. Like, you gotta be kidding me. But at that moment, in the frustration, in the heat of the moment, that's when those words we say, shock and awe in a negative way, like, oh my goodness, that is really the condition of my heart. That's like in senior, we used to have a lot of people that were working in care facilities, and Robin and what was his wife's name? Smith. Barbara. I went to her out one day and I said, Barbara, are there still dirty old men in the nursing home? She just about laughed right in my face. So you got to think through now, wait a minute. What happens to those men when they get in the nursing home that they're trying to pinch and grab and do all that stuff? What is that? Is there something in the water? No, it's just they have the diminished mental capability. So the abundance of their heart is more easily given out. So we have to be careful that our hearts are not, well, we have to be working at our hearts. And that's basically what he says there in Luke chapter 6. Did anybody look that up real quick? 43 through 45. It's the same thing, just a little different wording. Sarah, you have it there. I see your finger. Okay, what does Luke 6, 43, 45 say?
Every tree is known by its own fruit. Men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they gather grapes from the bramble bush. A good man out of the good treasure brings forth an evil man out of the abundance of the heart.
Yep. So, we again are able to discern, because again, our self-perception is as accurate as a carnival mirror. And I always hate the carnival mirrors that look me shorter and fatter than I already am. I love the ones that make me look tall and lean. Okay, but our self-perception is as accurate as a carnival mirror. But as soon as we get frustrated, as soon as we get in a bad situation, as soon as you hit your thumb with the proverbial hammer, what comes out of your mouth, if you would stop and listen to that for a minute, that's going to give you an indication of what's in your heart. So the battle is not so much with the vocabulary words. The battle, again, is for our hearts. We almost never say words we do not mean. Rather, we don't mean to say what we really think or feel. And as we begin to examine this material, we must examine it not with someone else in mind. So, since Bobby's not here, and we've been picking on him without any mercy at all, but Sarah can't be thinking, boy, I wish Bobby was here. Boy, I wish Bobby was here. Boy, I wish Bobby was here. What's my heart? What's my heart? So, number one, talk is not cheap. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit, says Proverbs 18:21. As you know, words kill, words give life. In fact, words determine the course of an entire country. And I got to be really honest, I am so thankful I have not received one phone call from Trump today. I am so grateful. I have not had, I don't know how many texts you guys get. Didn't you get a phone call from Trump? Oh my goodness, I'll show you. He's been burning up my phone. No, obviously it's not him. It's just these robocalls, but it says President Trump. I'm not going to answer that. But at any rate, the moral of the story is all these words. The election was won and or lost by words. By words. By words. So, talk is not cheap. Life and death. Words kill. Words give life. Words now are going to determine the direction of the next 4 years. President Bush and what's his running or his VP?
Bush.
No. Trump's a VP. Vance, JD Vance. They will be picking people and they will be saying, with words, I want you to do words. Words are going to govern, words are going to determine the whole course of this massive ship for the next 4 years. We take it for granted, and it takes many different types of forms. We communicate verbally. That's what I'm doing here. We communicate non-verbally, our body language, the deaf do sign language, American Sign Language. And there's all kinds of non-verbal body language. We're not getting into that. But we also have images. Vehicle turn signals, my brake lights on my car are communicating something. But then also, so does all the signage that we see all around us, stop signs, yield signs, no left turn on red, and that's just traffic. There's all kinds of signage that we see around us that communicate. So we have images for bathrooms, even in our bathrooms. We have the men and the women, and that just communicates. So we have communication taking different types of forms, and where we're getting here to some of the questions on the bottom third of the pages. Who here today has not been hurt by the words of others? And we all have. Who here today has not regretted words that we have spoken? Oh my goodness, in the 43 years of marriage, there are some things that still I regret, that still haunt me. So, we've got to say, yeah, we got to tighten up the ship a little bit here. Who here today has not had to referee an argument? Who here today can say your words spoken without violating the guidelines of Ephesians 4:29? Any kind of remember what Ephesians 4:29 says? Anybody? All right, someone should look it up. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Let no unwholesome or corrupt words come out of your mouth." Sarah, you got that already? Man, you're going to be our Bible sword winner for the day. If you wouldn't mind reading it, please.
Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary, that it may impart grace.
Good. All right. And then, that we just want it for building up as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to hear. Our words loving. How do I turn that off? Loving and appropriate. Okay, four fundamentals, life-altering principles. Number one, God has a wonderful plan for our words. We're just going to have to believe that. When he says there in Ephesians 4:29, that is a far better plan than we could imagine. In Ephesians 4:15, where he says, I want you to speak truthfully, and I want you to speak lovingly. In Ephesians 4:25, I want you to speak truthfully with your neighbor. And many other guidelines there, but those are some of the ones that we're very familiar with. So God has a wonderful plan of our words. We have to acknowledge that God's plan is better than ours. Because, number two, sin has radically altered the agenda for our words, resulting in much hurt, confusion, and chaos. So, misunderstandings. Why? A very simple answer, which is really not going to help us at all, but it's sin. Hard to communicate. What's the reason for that? Sin. Lack of trust, or unwilling to trust, or people betray trust. Why is that? Sin. Pride. Gotta win. Not keeping current. Sin. Now, that's not helpful to us at this point. We'll unpackage that through the next 13 chapters, but that's what we're up against. So sin has radically altered our agenda. So God planned everything perfect. Sin ruined it. So now what? But again, before we get to the third point, just as we need to recognize our need to be saved in order to be saved, we need to recognize that we need divine help with our communication, or we're never going to be helped in our communication. So number three then, Jesus Christ, we find the grace that provides all we need to speak as God intended us to speak. It is truly, again, as Philippians 4 says, my God shall supply all your needs to speak in the way that I want you to speak. Or as Philippians again 4 says, I can do all things through Christ who helps me speak the way he wants me to speak. And fortunately, we don't have to really guess where that is to be found, or like I said, sin, just that one big word doesn't really help us too much. We have to unpackage that. Well, the beautiful thing about the Bible is we don't have to guess. It's all unpackaged right there for us. All we have to do is acknowledge it, accept it, and then practice it. Because as Robin has said, practice doesn't make perfect, but practice makes permanent. All right, and then that's what we did, number 4. So before I flip the page, any questions, any thoughts? That you care to share?
If words matter, how do we accept someone who speaks with vitriol, hate, revenge, disparaging?
Yeah.
How do we do it?
Well, again, Jesus kind of said some ideas there in the Beatitudes. Love your enemy, bless those who curse you, pray for those who despitefully use you. As we went through 1 Peter, He gave us some principles to use in unjust suffering. So in a very quick answer, that would be some of the ways that we deal with that. Here's how we don't deal with it. If someone is calling me whatever, ugly or stupid, I do not retaliate and try to call them something worse, and we get into this name calling, hollering, screaming match that oftentimes it turns into. So we don't do that. And then the other thing that I do is I do a couple of things. First of all, I say, boy, I'm sure glad I don't have to live with that person. And even when I'm driving, because again, I got the horn honked at me because we were talking in the car, and I didn't really pay that much attention to the light, but I really don't think it was seconds. And, the horn blared, and he looked at me, and whatever. We drove. But I was just thinking, boy, I'm glad I don't live with that person. So that's another thing that kind of diffuses me a little bit, because I just think, boy, I'm glad that's not my brother, sister, whatever. I'm glad I don't have to live with them. And then lastly, I pray for them, because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And for someone to be that ugly, that's going to reveal their heart. Whereas Jesus says, if you come to me, I can give you rest, and you can have rest for your soul. So that helps.
And also, the words that we use there, we have to be careful not to judge someone's motives as well. We start assuming the reason why they're using the words they use.
Yes.
Because that we don't know their heart unless they reveal that, unless they say.
Yep.
So we have, if we're saying, well, someone's speaking with vitriol, that's really why they're speaking that way, or we could be judging their motives. So we always have to be careful. When we say, how do we live with
Words
it?
matter.
Huh?
Words matter. We're saying words matter.
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking it literally.
Well, yes, but yes, I would say yes. But then with that, then there's the subset is, we have to be careful we're not judging them too. But yes, on the very surface level, we take it face value. Because again, same thing with me. If you and I having a conversation, our words do matter. So, we want to be kind and tenderhearted and forgiving. But unfortunately, even among churches in America, that is a rare bird to find. There's just a lot of negativity. And I'm not excusing anyone or anything, but that's just kind of the way it is. So that's why we went through 1 Peter, and we just got to be willing to live under it, because that's just the way it is. I don't think our bosses always communicate to us in a loving, godly way. Or you can pick any other scenario.
People formulate their argument using words based on, in large part, what they perceive the person they're communicating to is, or what they perceive, or what they believe the person that they're communicating to did.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding where they're coming from.
Yeah, but you're right. But then that goes back to the misunderstanding. That's sometimes hard to communicate. It's got to win at all costs. So, yeah, it's a really difficult situation. So I don't want to try to minimize what you're saying, Karen. But the Bible does give us some very clear principles, especially in the Beatitudes, with how do we deal with just unloving people. And we have to love them. We have to pray for them. We have to, and this is where it kind of stinks, because according to Romans 12, to be honest, I would rather just ignore my enemy. But, Romans 12 says, if your enemy is hungry, what are you supposed to do to him? And if he's thirsty, you're supposed to give him something to drink. So, how do we respond to those kind of people? Well, Romans 13 or 12. Romans 12 gives us some more examples of how we do that. All right, God does speak. I got the fan on. That should be blowing whatever degree temperature air it is outside. So number 2, the value of all human communication is rooted in the fact that God speaks. So basically what I want to get across here is that when God spoke to Adam and Eve, he raised speech to a place of highest significance. And it was also his primary vehicle to convey truth. There are some who would say, yeah, but what about the dreams and visions? And I go, yeah, there are some dreams and visions in the Bible, but let's see, if we can compare them. how many dreams and visions were there, and even in the New Testament with John, and then compares to the big body of spoken, and what usually doesn't seem the way God communicates. And by the way, John was, well, let's just let that go. So as we continue on here, this is something important though, because God, he's infinite and he's almighty, and he chose human language to communicate his truth of his existence, his glory, to make himself known. And he also uses words to describe himself. So let's look at Isaiah 40. Isaiah 40 is really a wonderful passage as we look at it from just pure communication. Psalms, Proverbs, and then we get Isaiah. Isaiah 40. And unfortunately, the Israelites are in a pretty tough spot. So God is using Isaiah as his mouthpiece. But notice again, just the kind and the type of communication and what these words meant to these people in a difficult situation. So as we come to Isaiah 40, he begins saying, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Speak tenderly. Again, trying to get the significance of words here. So again, try to notice the word choice that's being used here, and cry to her. Okay, not so much the wording, but what's the message? Her warfare is ended, and that her iniquity has been pardoned, or is pardoned. Yahoo! Buddha would not want to be pardoned. That she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. Okay, we've been punished. We're done. Good. Glad that's over with. A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for the Lord. Okay, look at the messaging. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. Then notice the vocabulary words here. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. A voice says, cry. And I say, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers and the flower fades when the breath of the Lord blows on it. Surely the people are grass. James kind of picks up that idea in the New Testament where he says your life is but a what? Just that little bit of hot steam coming off your teacup or your coffee cup on a cold autumn day and vanishes, and that's it. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word, this would be, the Old Testament scriptures, the recorded words of God, will stand forever. And I wish we had time to read all of it, but let's go to verse 28. We'll read the more familiar last 4 verses of this. And again, the words, the messaging, life and death are in the power of the tongue. You got a nation that is going through some difficulties. And Isaiah says, have you not known? Have you not heard? Kind of an attention getter. That the Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. Whew, well, I'm glad he's not getting older. I mean, I'm getting older. Holy cow. Vitamin E is vitamin I. Ibuprofen is my drug of choice. But also, his understanding is unsearchable. We're not going to be able to figure God out. We're not going to be able to put him in our box. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youth shall faint and be weary, and the young man shall fail exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. So just a wonderful example of life-giving words. So words are powerful. Words are significant. So the good news is that Genesis 1 and 2, as you see there on a capital B of the second page, and we're going to go through this really quick. Words are significant. Will you marry me? You're hired. You're fired. Thank you. Those are all powerful. Or again, you're an idiot. You're ignorant. You're stupid. You're dumb. You'll never amount to anything. I wish you were never born. And all those other words are powerful. But it's kind of interesting that how did Satan deceive Eve there in Genesis chapter 3? Yeah. In fact, I want you to look at that right at the very beginning of your Bible, Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. Genesis 3. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. And what's the next two words? He said. He said. So again, God designed Genesis 1 and 2 because, behold, it was very good, this communication. And as Carl mentioned earlier, because he read the first chapter already, that was the first and only time where there was perfect communication. But then Satan, again, kind of the anti-Christ idea, he's kind of counterfeiting it. He then uses those words to bring about death, mistrust, miscommunication. Words that were going to bring life, eternal, he brings destruction. And also you see there, number 3, faith comes by hearing. So we're not going to look at that. Satan speaks. I mentioned that just a minute ago on the bottom of the second page. Paradise lost. He said to the woman. He said to the woman. Words are powerful. And then dramatic change and lasting trouble. And those we have these listed up on the board. Many voices with many interpretations. There's no absolute truth anymore. And of course, you've all heard it as I have. Don't force your truth on me. You have no right or authority to force your truth on me. And then we're also redefining words and deconstructing words and things of that nature. Let's go to number 3, third page. Number 3, people speak. People speak. So God spoke. God even told Adam and Eve to reproduce, to fill the earth, to subdue, have dominion over it. God and Adam were speaking and talking. Satan came into the picture, and Satan started talking. And then as we get to Genesis chapter 3, it's kind of interesting. And the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" And he said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked and hid myself." And then here again is a nice epistemological argument. Who told you that you were naked? What is the source, the base of your truth? Where does your truth come from? And then it's kind of interesting in verse 12, the man said, he's speaking to God, and he says, "The woman that you gave me, God, that woman you gave me." So men speak. Men speak. Words do shape our observations and define our experiences, even though, as we see on the board, sometimes that's difficult, as Sarah can probably know with her inquisitive children. One of the reasons that they're asking why is they're trying to make sense, define their existence, their observations. Some of it is maybe a ploy for other reasons. Because I told you, so do it. G. Communication is not just about talking, but it must include listening, which is a little bit what Edward said. So if we want to learn, we do need to listen as well as talk. If we want a relationship, or at least a good relationship, you just can't talk. But then in some cases, yeah, you do have to talk. But you also have to listen. You want a job? Listen, talk. Parenting? Listen, talk. Worship God? We listen to the reading of his word, and then we talk. We sing to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. But here's the point, though. The words don't belong to us. God created them. God created this whole capacity. And each time we use the ability to talk, we must speak within the guidelines that God has established. God created it. He created it for his purposes. Because Matthew 12 says, there on the bottom of the third page, "But I say to you that for that every idle word men may speak, they will give an account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. And there's some supporting evidence there. So just in the last 3-4 minutes we have, the very last page, here are some questions to maximize your return, play on words there, you're returning to the study and also what you're going to get from the study. We need to ask these questions. Do we talk in a way that leads to biblical problem solving? And it's not that every single conversation we have to try to fix something. But when there's problems, are we looking and leading others to biblical problem solving? Do our words convey a stand together or a me against him, her, them position? And we will find that out in our government here in a little bit. But then we also have it in our homes. And we definitely have it in our workplaces. Everyone's trying to get ahead. Everybody's trying to get the promotion. Everybody's trying to defend their departments and get the budget money they need next year for their departments. Do our words encourage others to be open and honest? Or do we shut people down just at the very beginning of it? And we do that sometimes with our body language. Hey, can I talk to you? And you go, right? Now, they may have picked the most inconvenient time to do it because, you're dead dog tired or whatever. But it's just that you just shut them down. You just shut them down. Because, again, as I said, there's different ways to communicate, not just verbally. Are we approachable or are we defensive, self-protective? There are some people that you say, I really don't want to approach them because I know they're just going to bite my head off. So I would just rather see the department suffer a hit. I would rather see the contract, I'd rather just let it go its course rather than me going up to them because, first of all, not only are they going to bite my head off, but we may lose the relationship over it. And it's really not worth it. So just let them crash and burn. And, I just don't want to risk my neck. I don't want to risk the relationship because there are some people that are so defensive and so protective that it's like, wow, it's like, kicking that mad dog or sleeping dog. And then again, do we communicate according to the principal relationships down there? Do we encourage faith and personal spiritual growth in others? God's got this. As we looked at it at the end here of our First Peter, you are God's concern. You just have to trust that you are God's concern. I had one sermon ready for Sunday if the election went another way, and that was basically it. God's in control, and God cares for us. Where is his concern? Since it went this way, we're going to go beat up on the men, make sure the men are here. In fact, there's going to be a 3-week series on the men. You ladies got off easy. You were only about 15 minutes of that sermon. But, does it just encourage faith and spiritual growth in others? The way we talk, diminutive speech. And as Karen mentioned, there are oftentimes people that just, when they talk, you just do cringe. You just go, And then number 7, when we speak, do we speak humble, honest words of confession? When we sin, and words of severe or sincere forgiveness. So it's not just, oops, I'm sorry, but do we actually work through the 7 A's of confession? And then lastly, do we willing to serve others with our words or demand that they serve you? And I'll tell you what, now that Robin's legs are working well, I love my little brass bell. Isn't that a wonderful thing, Tina? All I have to do is sit there. Now, I don't have her trained yet. I got Robin and I got the dog somewhat trained, but when I ring that bell, there better be a pitter-patter of feet somewhere. That's one way to communicate. And then number 10, just as we face the struggles of talk, we need to do so with the recognition of the gospel. The gospel. Andrew is going to interview me here for one of his school projects. And one of the things, he's not going to kind of like me with some of the latter questions that I'm going to be answering, because how would you address this? With the gospel. With the gospel. With the gospel. Because that's where our hope is found. It's like I said Sunday, when that Christ alone. That's where my hope is found. It's in the gospel. And then do we try to do so with his enabling grace? And then again, through the work of the Holy Spirit. So that's where we are. And basically, that's the summary of the book. So I think you can kind of stick that inside the cover of it. And then next week,